So my novel Folklorn was written over a period of a decade. And during that time, I had various writing and teaching jobs. I lived in all over the US. I taught in Seoul, Korea, and also worked in Stockholm, Sweden, where I live now. This is my second stint. This time I've come with my children and my husband. My husband is originally from Sweden. In that decade that I was working on the novel, I got married to a Swedish physicist whose PhD work, South Pole, I used for my novel, for my narrator's job, and also for extended metaphors on ghosts and memory. So yes, I married my research material. That was pretty helpful. I also had 2 children, and I also scattered my father's ashes into the sea. So there was a lot of milestones during this period, a lot of turning points, and all that fed into my novel. All that fed into endless revisions, as well as revisions of myself, my understanding of my past, understanding of my parents and their journeys. And I think most pointedly, what really helped me dig deeper into exploring my parents and their journeys was that I became a wife and a parent and an immigrant myself. I'm an immigrant mother in Sweden of 2 mixed race children who are themselves immigrants too. And so that gave me a much deeper insight into their experiences, as well as more compassion. And having young children also gave me more insight into my old childhood memories too. It gave me a different, broader perspective. So although I use all these elements from my family and from my childhood, my book is not autobiographical. It is inspired by family stories and family members, but I don't use straight realism. Instead, I use multiple genres in order to really vividly explore all these themes of cultural inheritance and biological fate. The genres that I use include the fantastic and the mythic, the surreal and the horrific, and the ridiculous and the absurd, because life is all of these things, especially now. And it's like that for many people. It has been that way for many people around the world, and definitely for my parents during their childhood and their adolescence, when they grew up during a war that ultimately split their country in 2. I also use multiple genres for my novel because it's about storytelling in all of its varieties, not just cultural myths and fairy tales, but also love stories and war stories, and the conflicting childhood stories between siblings. That's also a major point in my book. Folklore is about the stories we inherit and how we resist those stories and how we shape our identities. And I think even in the resistance, we are working with the stories that we inherit because we must examine and interrogate and ultimately revise and rewrite. And the Emily Bell is just one of many Korean folktales that I retell in a revisionist feminist lens. But one story that I include in my novel is especially important to me because it is the legend of my namesake ancestress. Ho Hwang-ok is recorded in the Samguk Yusa, which is the 13th century Korean chronicle mixing history and legend. And Ho Hwang-ok, she was a foreign princess whose parents dreamt that she would meet her husband on the seas. And so she sailed out onto the seas on a boat. And there she met King Soro, who also had a dream that he would meet his future wife. And so that's their meet cute on the high seas. And she agreed to marry him if 2 of her children would carry on her surname. And that is my surname. She is the ancestress, the founder of the specific her clan, of which my family belongs to. And we have a genealogy book, which in Korean is called the Chokbo, which lists over 60 generations. And this is a story my mother told me when I was a kid, even though it's not from her family, it's my father's side. And she told me this so I would be proud of being a descendant of an immigrant princess who was also a pioneer who became a queen. And it is a story that I tell now to my 5-year-old daughter, who also moved across the sea as an immigrant in this country. And it's a story that I share now in my novel. And I hope you'll read it and that you'll enjoy it, and that you'll also wonder about the teller of how and why we shape these stories, And I hope it'll inspire you to tell your own stories and pass them on. Thank you very much.